Hey everybody, this is Adam Burke from BangTheBook.com coming to you with my Frivy League Free Picks video. A look here at the Ivy League for Friday, March 1st. 4 games tonight in the Ivy. I'll break them all down for you here on this video. Over at BangTheBook.com, lots of phenomenal work being done by our talented cast of writers. We got daily college basketball picks from Kyle Hunter, who will also be on today's edition of Bang the Book Radio, so make sure you check that out. We've got our UFC 235 preview from Christian Pina. He's also on today's edition of Bang the Book Radio, so highly recommend you stay right here on our Bang the Book YouTube page. Check out that segment here today. Of course, you can also find Bang the Book Radio on Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, you name it, SoundCloud. You're going to find Bang the Book Radio wherever it is that you look. But also over at BangTheBook.com, we got daily NHL picks from Parker Michaels, NBA and college basketball coverage from Alan Moody, Admir Algic, Corey Papps, Jonathan Willis, soccer coverage from Admir and also Alex Ferreira, tennis coverage from Big Ten Watto. We got a lot of great stuff going on over there. NASCAR, golf, you name it, we're covering it at BangTheBook.com. And also next week, you'll be able to get my Major League Baseball coverage. Our betting guide will be released to go along with, all 30 season win totals, division futures, pennant futures, World Series futures, Cy Young, Home Run King, MVP odds, statistics that I use to handicap baseball. Really, really good all-encompassing guide to get you ready for the season here. Going to be releasing that as an ebook on Amazon as well as a PDF at BangTheBook.com. And also you can click through and get the individual articles. So going to release that baseball coverage next week. Been hard at work on that. Really looking forward to bringing that to our Bang the Book Radio listeners and our BangTheBook.com viewers here in the very near future. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the Ivy League for tonight. Again, 4 games on the docket here. And like I told you with the first Ivy League video that I did a couple of weeks ago, these are definitely plays I would look to do maybe a half unit on, something like that. Not a strong confidence league for me. Not a strong confidence league for a lot of people. It seems like a rather high variance league where home court advantage maybe doesn't matter as much. So definitely take these with a grain of salt here, but thought it would be a good video angle for Fridays. So go ahead and get into the Frivy League video picks here on today's video. All right, so we go to game 851, 852 to start things off. That is Columbia taking on Brown. Brown a 5-point favorite, total 139 for this game. One of the more interesting Ivy League games of the day because we saw a substantial line move. Brown was a 7.5-point favorite at open, got bet down to 4.5. Now this line kind of hovering anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5 as we're getting some buyback out there in the marketplace. But when you see a significant overnight line move, that does tell you that that is a sharp side here, at least at the outset, for tonight's Ivy League matchup. This is an interesting spot for Brown because they're tied for Cornell for the last spot in the Ivy League Conference Tournament, which starts in a couple of weeks here. And they play Cornell tomorrow night. So rematch game there for Brown. They lost the first game to Cornell. Maybe a little bit of a look-ahead factor in tonight's matchup. Could be one of the driving forces behind the line movement that we saw here on the overnight number. Also, a road revenge spot here for Columbia. They lost at home 65-63 as a 1-point favorite, total 138.5 a couple of weeks ago. So they're looking to exact some revenge here out on the road. This was an interesting first game. Both teams struggled offensively. Columbia only .909 points per possession. Brown .938 points per possession. And that was a game in which Columbia was 10 of 29 from 3. Still found a way to lose the game. Still did poorly from a points per possession standpoint. Brown had a big free throw advantage in the first game. 27 free throw attempts to 8 for Columbia. Extra 15 points at the line for Brown. So they wind up eking out that 65-63 win. That was a game coming off of an overtime loss against Cornell. So Brown bounced back in that spot. Will Brown fall victim to the look-ahead spot tonight? I don't know. They certainly could. But as you look at these two teams statistically, as you look at how that first game worked out, I think Brown is the play tonight as a 5-point favorite. Again, you got to hope that the Brown Bears are able to avoid that look-ahead situation and avoid a team out for revenge. But I do think they are clearly the better team here in this particular matchup tonight. Move on to game 853, 854. Cornell takes on Yale. Yale 12-point favorite, total 147.5 for this one. Yale back on the floor after losing to Harvard last Saturday. You know they want to avenge that loss and erase that memory very, very quickly. When these two teams played earlier in the season, back on February 16th, Yale won 98-92. So 190 points in that game. That was a game where Yale was a 5.5-point favorite, total of 141.5. So narrowly covered the number. Game flew way over the total. Way over the total. 190 points with a total of 141.5. No overtime or anything like that. It was just a tremendous offensive performance from both teams. That was Yale's worst defensive effort of the season. They allowed 1.275 points per possession, but offensively, they tied a season high with 1.358 points per possession. So for Yale here, obviously some give and take with a great offensive showing and a bad defensive showing. They also had a bad defensive showing last weekend against Harvard, allowing, I think, 1.28 points per possession in that game. So Yale's had a couple of tough defensive performances here lately. So you kind of wonder here, as we approach the Ivy League Conference tournament, as we get closer to, we're in the month of March now, but as we get closer to the time when Yale really needs to smooth out the rough edges, I bet they spend a ton of time in practice this week working on their defensive sets. This total has adjusted 6 points from the first meeting. Again, from 141.5 in that first game to 147.5 here tonight. And you look at the first game, Yale with a big rebounding advantage. 15 offensive rebounds in that game, just 6 for Cornell, 38-27 in boards overall for Yale. And Cornell in that game got some unlikely offense. Matt Morgan, one of the best players here in this conference, he dropped 35 in that game for the Big Red. That'll happen. But Jimmy Boeheim, 24 points in that game, only averages 11.4 per contest on the season. And then Gordon for Cornell, 15 points in that game, only averages 4.5. So while you could lay the big number with Yale here tonight as a 12-point favorite, I think I'm looking at the under 147.5. A 6-point adjustment in the span of a couple of weeks is pretty substantial. I think Yale commits to playing defense a little bit better here in this game. And also, some offensive regression from Cornell should show up in this second meeting. So we'll take under 147.5, probably my strongest of the Ivy League plays here on today's video. We move on to game 855, 856. Penn takes on Harvard. Harvard, a 5-point favorite, total of 140 in this one. It's been a tough Ivy League Conference play season for Penn. The Quakers have played the weakest conference strength of schedule here, and yet they're only 4-6 in conference play. On the outside looking in for the conference tournament, but they are only 1 game behind Brown and Cornell. It's been a tough conference play season for Penn because they've fallen on the wrong side of some close games here. 3 overtime losses for the Quakers, including an overtime loss to Harvard at home back on February 16th. That was a 75-68 score in that one. Penn was a 1.5-point favorite with a total of 138 in that matchup. So that's a game that went over because of overtime, and Harvard covered because of overtime there. So Penn with 3 overtime losses. They do have an overtime win and a regulation win by 2 points, but they're keeping a lot of games close here in conference play. They're just kind of falling on the wrong side of variance in some of those matchups. Both of these teams very dependent on 3-point shooting. 44.1% of Penn's field goal attempts coming from beyond the arc, 42.3% from distance for Harvard. In the first meeting, Harvard was 7 of 28 from 3. Penn was 12 of 26 from 3. Still managed to find a way to lose that game. Some concerns about Harvard, though. They're dead last in the conference in turnover percentage on offense at 22.5%. That's not particularly good, especially taking on a Penn team that can hurt you from distance if they're making shots. So that does worry me about Harvard tonight. Penn's played a lot of close games. Yeah, they're stepping up in class a little bit here relative to the rest of their conference schedule, but I'm still going to lean slightly to Penn plus the 5 tonight. They have a knack for keeping games close. I think they can definitely do it here tonight in this one, especially with Harvard hosting Princeton tomorrow night. So a little bit of a look-ahead factor potentially for the Crimson. Speaking of Princeton, game 857, 858 here. They're on the road at Dartmouth. The Tigers a 1-point favorite, total of 138 for this matchup. Obviously, this is a suspiciously low line. You've got a Princeton team at 7-3 in conference play. against a Dartmouth team that's 2-8 in conference play. Harvard is on deck for Princeton, as mentioned. And also, in the first meeting between these two teams, Dartmouth only lost by a point on the road at Princeton. Princeton was a 6-point favorite in that game. Total was 136. So we see some home court adjustments here, and we also see the total bumped up a couple of points. The thing about Princeton, though, is they don't hurt themselves. They're tops in the conference in adjusted defensive efficiency, second in offensive rebounding percentage, second in not allowing offensive rebounds. They take care of the basketball better than anybody else in this conference. They are very good at the free throw line. They defend the three-point line well. And for Dartmouth, very good offensive team, top offensive team in this conference in conference play from an adjusted efficiency standpoint, but they're not a good defensive team. Good free throw shooting team, good 2-point offense, not a great defensive team. So you've got contrasting styles here where Princeton's not a great offense, but a very good defense. Dartmouth, good offense, not a great defense. Interesting note here about this game as well, that Princeton could be without Devin Kennedy again, their senior guard and leading scorer, also their highest usage player. He's been suspended the last 2 games, was suspended for 2 games earlier in the season. But in those 4 games without him, Princeton's 4-0 with an average margin of victory of 12 points per game. So they have not missed him at all whatsoever. We'll see if he plays tonight. You want to keep that in mind. Get some late updates before this game goes off. But all of that being said, with the total package here, this is a suspicious line. There are some context clues that would suggest that Dartmouth probably the right side here in this game. Also, Princeton with that look-ahead factor to the Harvard game tomorrow night. So I will lean Dartmouth to pull off the minor upset at home, +1 tonight against Princeton. Again, the Ivy League is a tough league. It's a very tough nut to crack. Keep your exposure and your risk low in this conference here. But the 4 games for tonight, I like Brown over Columbia as a 5-point favorite. The under in Cornell and Yale, under 147.5. I do think this is a total that could rise throughout the day, so maybe wait and play the under later on tonight. But again, with that 6-point adjustment from the first game, would appear to be value on the under. Penn over Harvard is a slight lean +5. And finally, Dartmouth +1 against Princeton. I'm Adam Burke for BangTheBook.com.